This is the Digital Agency Insiders Podcast. Inside, you'll learn how to build, grow, and scale your digital marketing agency, all from the comfort of your favorite coffee shop. Let's get started with the show.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Digital Agency Insiders Podcast, the podcast that gives you a little inside look into how entrepreneurs have built and grown their digital marketing agencies. I am Tabitha Thomas, your host, and if this is your first time checking out the podcast, can I just encourage you to go hit that subscribe button as we release new episodes each and every Tuesday. So I'm excited about today's guest. Today I have with me Matt Johnson. Matt is the founder and CEO of Pursuing Results. Now, Pursuing Results started in 2015 as a done-for-you podcasting for business coaches, consultants, and thought leaders. He is also the host of the Micro Famous podcast and co-host Real Estate Uncensored. He's been a sales and marketing coach, a sales manager, a marketing director, and the list goes on and on and on. He came highly recommended from a few of our previous guests and some of my friends. So we are super excited to have you with us. Matt, welcome.
Thank you. I'm super pumped to be here.
So one of the things, and this may be a faux pas for podcasting, but one of the things that I love asking right off the bat is, what did the path to becoming an entrepreneur look like for you? So looking through, all the many roles in your career, you've been self-employed a few times. So I'm guessing the entrepreneurial bug has probably bit you a few times. So what has kept you or drove you to start some businesses?
Well, kind of, although I'm envious of people that were like selling and flipping candy at like 13 years of old, age, and put themselves through college. Like I wasn't doing any of that. I was in a basement, very pasty, practicing the drums or the piano or whatever. And my dad was a pastor. So like the closest thing I got to an entrepreneur was watching my dad pastor his own church. Nobody else I knew had a college degree or let alone a business, like nobody in my entire family or friends. Yeah. So anyway, so I didn't get bit by the entrepreneur bug until I was in my mid-20s and I started a real estate team. And I had the illustrious timing of starting that in 2007. So, so that led to a bunch of odd jobs and wandering and trying to figure out what I wanted to do and spending 5 years chasing the dream as a musician. So I get out of that and I end up doing like account management for somebody else's marketing company. So that was 5-6 years ago. Flash forward to today, and I'll get into the journey or whatever, but today I run like my own agency with a team of people all around the world. I don't have anybody here in San Diego with me. I run the agency in about 2 hours a week, which frees up the rest of my time to do things like write the book, host my own podcast, be interviewed, like just the stuff that I enjoy. But for the most part, I work mornings. That's my schedule. I work mornings, I stack up all my calls, and the rest of the afternoon is either off or it's optional. So I'll come back and do like an hour, maybe 90 minutes of work or something a few times a week in the afternoon. So that's kind of the before and after.
That's incredible. That's incredible. So what led you to podcasting in the first place? Like that's kind of a little bit random if few people do that, but
well, it is.
So what made you want to start a podcast and what got you into doing them for other people? Like every
digital agency owner, you fall into it mostly. Well, so for me, it was odd because I was working in marketing, but I was working with like thought leaders and business coaches in the industry where I came out of, which is real estate and mortgage. And I was doing like Google Hangouts with those people back when that was a thing. One of them called me up one day and just said, dude, like we have a blast. We have great content. I want to do more coaching. You want to do this and that. Like, let's start a podcast together. And that was Real Estate Uncensored, which is funny because I was going to call him the next week and pitch him the same thing.
Well, that's when it's a perfect idea, right?
Yes, exactly. So that podcast ended up taking off and doing really well. And it's like 1.5 million downloads and got a lot of industry accolades. Within 18 months, we were headline, like speaking at sold out, standing room only, breakout sessions or whatever you want to call them. That did really well. However, on the back end of that, I had started working with another consultant in the same space, but who had like appealed to a much more focused, more valuable slice of that market. He ended up making me a coach or like a partner in that consulting business. We launched a podcast for that too. So I was hosting 2 podcasts side by side with 2 co-hosts in the same exact space, but with wildly different focus, and they got wildly different results. The podcast that got all the attention and the downloads didn't generate anywhere near the revenue of the podcast that got very few downloads, but had a really clear message for a very valuable slice of people. So that was like, okay, that was the wake up call, right? So it's not that podcasting is a silver bullet, which it's not. It's the strategy behind it. And if you get it aligned with the right kind of business, podcasting can be a magic train to very, very many good things, but you got to get that fit right. And so that ended up, that's what led to all the principles that ended up in the Microfamous book, and led to me just really dialing in the agency to where I focus on selling one thing to the one type of person that I know will get like the most benefit from it. So that's the short story.
I love it. So how did you figure out who that one person was, that one client was, and what their message needed to be? How did you guys, was that a process?
Definitely a process. Yeah. Because it came out of real estate. So there was a time, and this leads to like my biggest mistake in entrepreneurship, which is I ended up in 4 different businesses, because the idea was, well, I'm a marketing guy and I'm in real estate. Therefore, I was getting all these opportunities to build products or get involved in consulting companies or SaaS or whatever. And so the idea was, like, if you just encountered me in any way and you took a step forward and bought something, I made a piece of it. And I thought that was a good thing. And then I realized that I'm going down the wrong path. And I should have known better, because I came out of an agency that sold one thing to one type of person.
Yeah.
So finally I got a hold of myself and I said, okay, well, it's not real estate agents that's my market. It's not even so much real estate coaches that are my market, even though those were all my friends and my favorite people. But I asked myself this question. If somebody flew into San Diego, if one of my clients flew into San Diego and texted me and said, hey, I just landed, I know it's off the cuff, do you want to go grab a drink with me? Who is the person that I'd be excited to versus the person that I look at the phone and go, oh, how can I get out of this?
Yeah.
And that was the question that turned everything around. Then it was like, okay, it's business coaches, consultants, and thought leaders that have a message. They want to teach other entrepreneurs how to do what they've done. They have amazing intellectual property. They can make a real impact on people's lives. Like, those are the people that I want to hang out with. And that's who I want the agency to serve. And it was that flash of insight to just ask myself that question that settled everything. And then I just restructured around the answer to that question.
Well, and then work becomes a lot more fun because you're working with people that you actually enjoy being around.
Yes. Yes. It's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful virtuous cycle.
It's almost like you did that on purpose.
Almost. I wish I could say I did it sooner. What's funny about that is I made the same mistake in business that I made in music, which is I was in 4 bands at one time back in the day, because I was thinking about like a lottery ticket.
Yeah. One of them's going to work. One of them's going to work.
One of them's going to work. And to a certain degree, music is a little bit more like that. You can play in 3 or 4 different bands and you can kind of put your lottery tickets in. Business is not that way at all. Like, you can take an average idea and through hustle and hard work, you can make it work. You can take 4 amazing ideas and you can suck at all 4 of them by trying to do all 4 at once. And that's what I was doing. So I got out of all that. Got out of the other consulting company I was a partner in, the other agency I was a partner in. Like, I got out of all of it. And I just said, look, if I'm going to focus on one thing, why not focus on the thing where I actually have 100% ownership? That's an amazing concept.
Well, and you enjoy it. So I've got a question. What do you play in the band?
Well, now I do. You can see in the background behind me, there's a keyboard and a bass. So I've been working on live looping and just kind of being a one-man band. The last time I was in a studio was 2 years ago. Like, I don't devote as much time to it as I would like. But I can get in there and just play everything. So now I don't need other inconvenient musicians, because they're very flighty. I don't know if you've noticed that. Musicians, very flighty group.
That's awesome. So I would imagine at this point, most of your clients are probably coming to you. So what was your process like when you first got started with finding clients?
Well, the process was a combination of 2 things, and it has shifted a little bit, but the same 2 things still work. Because the first thing was you invite people onto your podcast. Now, I didn't know that was a strategy at the time, but I was just inviting people onto my real estate podcast because they were influencers in that space. And then those people behind the scenes would ask what I did or how I was putting out that much content. And I would tell them about the team and they would go, oh my God, like, we got to have a follow-up conversation. So that was the first thing. The second thing was, as I started to take on more clients, and our guest booking is like included in our service, and I started off doing that myself. So I was the one reaching out, finding guests and pitching them on coming on our client shows. The same thing would happen. I would reach out to them on LinkedIn. I'd find people who had mutual connections. I'd shoot them a message. I would say, hey, we've got a couple of podcasts that we were on that I think you might be a great guest for. Let me know if you want to jump on a quick call and we can talk through and see if any of them are a good fit. Mm-hmm. And that's still true today. That's a pretty good, for the right person, an automatic yes, as long as you're credible and they look at your profile and go, this person's legit. That's an automatic, pretty close to a yes. And so that stuff still works. So I just reach out, like every day on LinkedIn, I reach out to a couple of people. I'll go through 10 or 15 profiles until I find the one or two I want to reach out to, because I'm intuitively looking for someone that's the right person that I want to have in my world. And then I reach out to them and we'll set up calls and we'll get them booked. And that always leads to clients. So when you stack that on top of stuff like podcasting and me being a guest, and you have like the relationship kind of system that I have behind the scenes, then all that stuff kind of works together, because I get all the credibility of the podcast, but then I have the conversations with the people that end up turning into clients.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So how did it turn into actually doing podcasts for other people?
Just demand. I went where the demand was. That's what people were asking for. So they would ask me, like when I was just like an influencer in real estate, I was hosting 3 different shows with some of the top names in the business. And so it was easy like that. I got that their credibility bled off onto me. So that was number one. But then they were also asking, how in the world are you doing this much content? Right. I mean, there was a point where I was doing live podcasts 5 to 7 hours a week. It was insane. And I wouldn't recommend that anybody do it. Now I had fun.
Sounds miserable.
I burned out on it. And as fun as it was, I still burned out. But, they would ask me like how I put out that much content. And I would just tell them like, yeah, I used to do it all myself. And I built this team of specialists that I basically just show up and I record and everybody else does the rest of the stuff. And then I just approve the email before it goes out. And they're like, holy cow, that thing exists. Like I've been wanting to start a podcast for a while and I can't figure out how to make my team do it. I'm like, yeah, just let's grab a call. You can rent my team. And, basically, so I let people rent, they would pay me, but they effectively were just renting my team in the off hours when they weren't working for me. Right. Yeah. And that worked until that broke. And then I'm like, okay, well now I have to start an actual agency and be an agency owner.
Gotcha. That's pretty incredible. Yeah. So aside, go ahead. You're about to say something.
Oh, I was just going to say like, it's such a, and I did this for a long time. One of the other big mistakes I made in entrepreneurship was, like thinking too much about like what I want to do, a lot of navel gazing, a lot of like, what do I want to be known for? Like, what do I want to do and stuff like that. And that's fine. Like you're going to have an existential crisis every 5 to 10 years in business anyway. But please, I'm like my 3rd midlife crisis in life as it is. But I think we do put so much stock into like trying to figure out what perfectly matches with our passion. And we get all of our identity wrapped up in the business to the point where we can't move forward with something that people just want and are clamoring for because, well, I don't know if I want to be known for that. And if, like I just followed the demand. People were going, like they weren't clamoring for my info products in real estate. They were clamoring for the podcast agency. And so I'm like, well, I'm really good at it. And I enjoy the people that I work with. I enjoy the clients. And that was the thing that triggered it was if I'm going to go in on it, go in all in. The key was figuring out who was I going to go all in with. And then I was like, okay, now I can enjoy this. And now I can be comfortable being known for this because I'm serving the right people. So it just kind of all clicked into place.
Somebody asked me recently, like you interview all these digital agency owners. What's the one thing that they all have in common? And every single person has this burning desire and passion to help somebody else, whatever niche that may be in. That's the one thing that they all have in common, or at least the successful ones.
Well, it definitely helps. Yeah. I mean, you won't last long in the agency world if you're only in it for the money. You have to take pride in the marketing that you're doing and the impact that you're making. So yeah, I love the fact that marketing tends to draw those people because I get along very well with those folks.
Yeah, they're fun. So aside from the business and the podcast, you've also written a book called Micro Famous, as we see behind your head there, which is available on Amazon, which obviously directly ties to your main podcast. So what inspired you to actually write the book? And can you give us a little bit of a summary of what we could expect if we read it?
Yeah, well, and I'll give you the agency owner perspective on this, which I don't usually share, which is that I wanted more ideal clients. That's why I wrote the book. So the book is like, even the title of the book immediately disqualifies the people that drive me the most nuts, which is the people that refuse to niche down. And I remember sitting in a workshop one time after it was in the lead up to the release of the book. And I was sitting in a workshop and somebody asked me like what the working title was. And I told him, and he's like, well, why would nobody want to be micro famous when I can be macro famous? Like, I don't exactly know who all of my audience wants to be. They're like, my content is amazing. Everyone can benefit from it. Yes. I'm like, that's exactly why you're not my ideal client. So the book does a lot. But the best thing that it did for me is it helped clarify my point of view. You know, there's concepts in there like the clear and compelling idea and the 3 stages of influence that were kind of just floating around in my head. They were stuff that I talked about with clients behind the scenes, but they weren't clearly defined, and it wasn't my own intellectual property. So the writing of the book got all of that stuff clear. And then if people pick up the book and they only flip through like the first 4 or 5 chapters, they're going to get the most key concepts that I wish that ideal clients would come in understanding. So that's the short story. That's from an agency owner's perspective. That's why I wrote a book instead of just like doing more podcasting.
So how long did it take you to actually write the book?
Much longer than I thought. Because 2 years ago, I wrote a book in a month, and then I realized I wrote the wrong book. So that's still on the shelf. And I'm like, crap. Okay.
I was going to say, did you release that one or no?
No, that's more, that'll be 10 years from now if I release that one. So, so March of last year, I started writing. The writing process took me 6 months. It took me another 6 months to get the book released. Now, it took me 6 months to write because I was hashing out the concepts, the ideas. You know, like I know what I believe about podcast sponsorships. That wasn't the problem. I can bang out that chapter in an hour. But when you start really getting into what do I believe about social media, what do I believe about what thought leaders should do, and how do you attract attention in a way that actually converts into demand? Like there was just a lot of mental work I had to do to work out what my own beliefs and opinions were. If that stuff was already nailed down, it would take you a lot longer. But I have talked to many people that have written books, and they all tell you just plan on it taking 2 or 3 times as long as you think. And they were right.
So true. Ben has actually had taught people how to write a book by actually just recording it, and then having it transcribed. He's like, that was the fastest way he could get a book done. It was just get it out of your head somewhere else. And that's usually the quickest way to do that. So
yes, yeah. He's a genius. He caught my eye with his, one of the posts he put up a few months ago about his book writing and publishing process, where he like puts something out there and then comes back and kind of finishes it later. I was like I couldn't have done that with my book because I had so much other work to do to work out the concepts.
Yeah.
If I had though, his system would work amazingly well.
Well, you want to talk about motivation. People have already bought it. You got to get your butt in there and get it done.
That doesn't work for me. So yeah,
no, me either.
I couldn't put something else. Yes. It would just stress me out. And then the ideas wouldn't flow. Like I had to step back from the business. I had to clear my afternoons. Like I had to sit in a Starbucks to get this done. So yeah, like if I hadn't had all the systems right in my agency, like literally the book would not exist. It just wouldn't have happened.
So what do you think has benefited your business more, the book or the podcast? Or are they kind of the same?
Well, the book is so new. Yeah. It's not even close. It's the podcast, but yeah, over time, nobody will look back and think about the podcast that I hosted. Probably they will look back 100 years from now and hopefully get a copy of Micro Famous and go, wow, like this was actually a really great strategic book for its time that had a lot of impact. So I think ultimately the book will have more impact and more staying power, I guess.
Yeah, I like it. So I really like this quote. We don't need to be everywhere or be everything to everyone. We only need to be famously influential to the right people. So who are the right people for us? And how do you go about being micro famous to them?
Okay. So if you ask yourself the same question that I did, that's relatively easy to identify who your right people are. What freaks people out is niching down far enough to where the other people agree with you that they are a niche and that you can serve them, and that it's big enough that you can take on enough clients to build a successful agency. The funny thing about it is I know multiple people, friends and clients, who run 6- and 7-figure businesses in spaces where the entire universe of people who could give them money is 10,000 people. It's way easier to niche down and what I would call shrink the battlefield. And you can be everywhere to a very specific set of people. right? You don't have to be everywhere online. You don't have to be the next Gary Vee, but for the right people, it's a lot easier if you figure out who they are, because then you can focus all of your resources on being everywhere where they are hanging out. You can be on the podcast they listen to. You can be on the, you can be on LinkedIn if that's where they're at, or you can be in a Facebook group if that's where they're at, whatever that is. So that's where you start. You always start with the people first. Then you figure out, like, once you know who the people are, then you can go, okay, what do I have to say that is clear and compelling to those people? Because it has to be both. And there's a whole chapter in the book where I go through and say, like, look, if here are the symptoms of if you only have one and not the other, if it's unclear or if it's not compelling, like, these are the symptoms. And you'll probably recognize yourself in one of those categories, because most, I would say most agency owners and most experts fit into the category of unclear and compelling, right? They have compelling content. They do have opinions, like you have a certain way that you believe that things should be marketed. Our buddy Zach Hammer has a very specific approach to how he wants to build a marketing campaign. He has opinions that differ from mine, and that's okay. So the question is, are they clear? Right?
Yeah.
Are those opinions clear, and do they resonate with the right people? And if you can figure that out, that starts the promise of the process of becoming micro famous, because the message is way more important than just the medium. Especially when we talk about, am I going to be on LinkedIn versus a Facebook group? It's way more important to have the message for the right people than it is to get the place right.
It always surprises me how far somebody can niche down, and I'm gonna tell on myself here. I'm addicted to a podcast that's called My Favorite Murder, which is awful. I realize that. But I'm also in Facebook groups for these, but there's not just like My Favorite Murder Facebook group. There's a My Favorite Murder Facebook group for people that love plants. I'm like, that is such a niche within a niche.
Wildly specific.
Isn't it though? But there's like thousands of people in there. I'm like, if something as crazy as a freaking murder podcast.
Did the plants murder people in the podcast? Is that what's happening?
No, they just, I don't know. It's weird. They actually have plants that they name after murder. It's weird.
Interesting.
But
okay.
Sometimes you got to have weird things that you listen to kind of defrag your brain, and that's mine.
I get that. Yeah, I don't listen to a ton of business podcasts as much as I used to, so I get that. I'm more into like the political, social, economic, like all that stuff. I know it's not relaxing. I wouldn't call it relaxing. It's just it's a change of pace intellectually.
Well, I was almost about to say that you and Zach actually disagree on something, but you're still friends. That's incredible today.
I believe me, I'm aware. Yes, I have many people that I have unfollowed on social media, hopefully temporarily. I'm waiting while the madness passes, but we are in a very weird space where, like if you're an agency owner, I don't know, man. It's either you have to take sides or you have to be really good at diplomatically not taking sides, because those are the only two options.
Yes.
If that second one is even an option, I don't necessarily agree that it is. 3 years ago, my business coach, who's a good friend of mine, kind of took his stand publicly, immediately lost half his clients. Right. But now all of his clients know what his political views are. So when this thing came around, and he kept speaking out, nobody was surprised. His business didn't drop, right? Because he took the pain back then.
Early,
I think we're coming to a crossroads where you're going to have to decide whether you take a stand politically and start preparing yourself and getting to know your clients a little bit better, and seeing if I happen to say something on a podcast or on a live, or somebody comes after me and I get hit by a Twitter mob or something like that, like which clients are going to stand with me and which ones are going to run, because you got to know.
That's true. That's true. So going back to podcasting, do you have a client podcast that you consider one of your greatest successes so far?
Yeah, there's a couple of them. The team building podcast with Jeff Cohn is definitely one. It doesn't have a ton of downloads. It just dominates that space. It gets the most downloads of that space. And it built a multi 6-figure coaching business in like 18 to 24 months off of that podcast. And still, like, I was sitting in a room speaking at his very first event. It was in Omaha, Nebraska, which is the middle of nowhere, right? You know where that is. To like 100 people got on a plane and came to Omaha, Nebraska for the very first team building event. And I was sitting there in the room where somebody asked him, how many of these people are here because of your podcast? And 70% of the hands shot up.
Well, they got to really want it if they're willing to go to Omaha, Nebraska.
I know.
I mean,
And there's no reason to go there. There's just no reason to go.
None whatsoever.
Yeah, but that's definitely one of them. And everybody else has different varying levels of success. But I will say this, like as an agency owner, I don't have 100% success rate, right? Because podcasting isn't a magic pill, and neither is any of the things that we sell in marketing. There is no magic silver bullet. So part of the reason that I wrote the book is that I want people that have an understanding that their podcast has to line up with their business model. And I think anybody that sells marketing, you better understand like what exactly is that you're selling and how does it align with their business? Because if it's not aligned, it's not going to work for them. And if you know that going in, you're taking their money for no good reason. And I didn't want to do that. Like I wanted to start restricting myself to the people that I thought had the best chance of it actually going gangbusters and generate like a 10x legitimate 10x ROI. So if they pay me $2,000 a month, they better be generating 50 to 100 grand or more in income off of the podcast. And if I am sitting on that sales call thinking, I don't think they qualify, I don't take them on as a client anymore, which is, that's painful to turn away the revenue. But I've been in enough conversations with them 6 and 12 months in when they're going, hey, this just isn't generating the revenue. I'm saying, I know, because you won't do what I tell you to do. Like I've been enough of those conversations to know that I don't want to have them if I can help it.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my goodness. So do you have a favorite, this is like asking for your favorite child. Do you have a favorite guest story or an episode of your podcast that's been your favorite?
Yeah, there was one that I put out recently that was with Lars Hedenberg, who's built a 7-figure professional services company and then turned around and started teaching people how to do it and turned that into a 7-figure coaching consulting company. So he came on the podcast to share how he did that. I launched his podcast, which is called the Business Freedom Podcast. And he was just talking about like how podcasting has completely changed the quality of his sales calls. It was a really nice interview, but he's just one of the sharpest people I know. So if anybody is in the agency world, like he could turn around and teach somebody how to build an agency up the same way. He's just one of the most methodical, systematic people I know. And then there's the other one from a few years ago where the guest stood up halfway through to answer their door and we realized that they didn't have pants on. That's an unrelated episode, but that's probably my favorite podcasting story. Was the doorbell rang during a Facebook Live episode, and she was sitting at her kitchen table. And it just so happened that the camera switched away from her. We could see it in the corner, but my co-host was talking and we could see that she got up to like answer the door to keep somebody from ringing the doorbell, and she had no pants on.
Like, apparently it really does happen. I mean, like,
and that was before the days of everybody Zooming from home with no pants on. So I don't know what her excuse was, but I thought that was hilarious.
I'm like, maybe she had just really short shorts on.
I would like to say that's the case, but that was not the case.
So everybody listening to this, always wear pants. You never know what's going to happen.
Exactly. I say it's a good policy for life, but that could just be me.
Anyway, it's like I keep seeing people like, I don't want to wear masks. Well, I don't want to wear pants to a restaurant either, but
exactly. Yeah.
Anyway, so are there any other podcast speakers or authors that you're currently really interested in and really following?
That's a great question, because I don't have a lot. Tim Ferriss did something really interesting, which is he launched a new podcast. I think it was called Tools of Titans. It was after the book, which has been out for a few years. Yeah. But he basically came out with a podcast that was essentially him reading through his book. So it is a solo podcast where there are no guests. It's just him talking, and it's much, much shorter. They're like 15 to 20 minute episodes. And to me, that's a little indication that like things are changing in the podcast world. Right. When Tim Ferriss does something that's the exact opposite of what Tim Ferriss has been working and what's been doing really well for him for the last however many years, I'm seeing more people do that. And I actually just split my podcast in two. So I've got all my conversations on one feed and all my solo episodes on another feed. That way it's very clear to the audience what they're signing up for and what problem that podcast solves. I think we're going to see a lot more of that, what you would call like super niche, maybe is a good word for it. Yeah. So that I was keeping an eye on that, and seems to be doing well.
Yeah. I can tell you, Zach Hammer has been in my head. He's like, Matt keeps telling me you got to talk, not just do recordings and interviewing other people. You need to talk too. I'm like, no, I don't. I don't know.
Well, keep in mind, I would consider like the episode you did with Ben or the episodes that you did with Ben, like I would consider that a solo episode. That is not an interview. That is you guys talking about what the agency is doing. I would consider that a solo episode because you're on the same team talking about internally what you guys are doing. You're not bringing somebody else's point of view. It's all your belief system talking about what you guys are doing. Like, so keep that in mind. You did solo episode. Can be you just showing up and talking into the mic. But if you can find somebody that just has good, chemistry and can bounce you questions and you just have fun conversations with, but it's all about you and your point of view. That's perfectly fine too.
Okay, Zach. Well, I'm taking that one. I'll take it.
So I'll smack him on your behalf.
He's just trying to help. So he's been touting your expertise to me for a while. So do you have any other projects or business things that are coming up that you want to share with us? I don't. And that's the beauty of it. I don't. No, I'm just, basically now it's, here's the way that I'm looking at growing the agency. We are overstaffed. And I started an internship program that I've been tinkering with since last year that's already paying off. I had one account manager leave. We just replaced her with someone from our internship program. She's kicking butt 2 weeks into the job. That's changed things because I have the whole system worked out to where I know I can double or triple the business. And I not only have most of the people in place, but more importantly, I have the systems to build that. So now it's just a marketing challenge. So we're experimenting. We're working with Zach on some paid ad stuff. We're doing some LinkedIn stuff, just to amplify the effects of the podcast and get the content into more people's hands. But yeah, the challenge is just like, once you decide on that one person and the one thing, man, it makes everything else so much easier. And I have so much space to really focus on the key problems. And the challenges in the business change from being too busy and scattered and putting out fires everywhere to just thinking really deeply about what is that next step, which is what gave me the space to write the book. And now I'm in the phase of, okay, now that I have the book, let's maximize the results from the book. So that, that's basically what the entire year is about. That's awesome. That's awesome. So the last question that I've got for you, and it's the big one. If you could sum up all of your experiences into one word or thought and tell your younger self about it, what would it be?
Wow. Really? Into one word?
Hey, can I just say, I didn't write that. Derek did. So you can blame him.
Okay. All right. I'm going to have to send Derek a very angry thank you note. A sternly worded thank you note.
So what's a good piece of advice for anybody who's just starting out? They're starting their age, besides niching down, because obviously we all say that a million times, but outside of niching down, what would be some advice you'd give?
If I have to distill it down to one word, I know what the word would be, but you're not going to like it. It's systems.
No, it's a good word.
All right. Now here's why. Because if you ever read the book Systems Mindset,
I have not.
It's amazing. Sam Carpenter, freaking amazing book, life-changing, not very long. Here's why. Here's what I would tell my younger self. The world works exactly as it's supposed to do. If you don't like the outcomes, change something in the system. So if you don't like the fact that your agency is scattered and messy and complicated, something is wrong in your system. Go down below the decks, get into the engine room and start tinkering until you start getting better results. I spent way too much time in my early 20s thinking that I was the problem, like my identity, or that I was like, you know what I'm saying? Like low confidence, choosing the right things. The world was against me, you name it. Then I read books like that and I got around people that had that mentality. And I realized that, the problem was me, but it was just the fact that I didn't have the right understanding to go tinker with the systems of my life and my business. And once I did that, I started realizing, oh, wait a minute, this is the answer. And I just went all in. So like now I would tell somebody, systems before people. Do not hire rock star people until you have rock star systems first. Then you will attract rock star people. And I was very fortunate to have that modeled for me by the people that I used to work for and my early clients, that I just copied that and put it into the agency.
They saved you big time. A lot of hassle and headaches if they were able to put systems in place, because that is the big one. I like it. So, all right, where can people get more from you? Tell us where to find you.
Easy, getmicrofamous.com. So website's in progress, but right now all the links are out to everything are there, the podcast, the book, all that stuff. If you're a reader like me, you want to get the physical copy, just go to microfamousbook.com. It's free, plus the shipping, you know the drill on that. So that's the best 2 places.
All right. Well, it's good. I have enjoyed just getting to chat with you and finally putting a face with a name that I've heard so many times. So.
I had no idea he was promoting my expertise, but I
not
appreciate
just Zach, but Richard too. So for sure.
Oh yeah, I love Richard.
All right, Matt. Well, thanks so much, and we'll see you guys next Tuesday.
You've been listening to the Digital Agency Insiders Podcast. For more tutorials on growing your digital marketing agency, make sure to visit digitalagencyinsiders.com.